If there's just one Bible verse that Jehovah's Witnesses wish they could pluck out of existence, I think it would be verse 6 of chapter 4 in the first to the Corinthians. It says, "Do not go beyond the things that are written, so that you may not be puffed up with pride, favoring one against the other." Jehovah's Witnesses avoid this verse like the plague because, as a high control group, they need to go beyond scripture to find all the rules their followers need to follow. The Bible has nothing to say about tobacco, cannabis, or other drugs, despite all of them being widely used back then. But notice how they show what a new convert has to do to become a Jehovah's Witness.
A minister should also be free from all non-medical use of addictive or mind-altering substances.
Non-medical? But taking something when I'm feeling a little stressed, like maybe, I don't know, a little weed? That's okay, right? And it's for the stress. I guess I didn't quite understand what medical meant.
So we see you during the week.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Jade.
Thanks.
We'll be back.
So how do they justify applying rules where the Bible is silent? Well, simple. They just had to come up with the concept of Bible principles. Jehovah's Witnesses say Bible principles are fundamental truths that allow you to use your thinking ability to understand how a principle applies in a particular situation. Or that's how Jehovah's Witnesses explain it. In reality, it's more of an excuse to use a false equivalency to say something is a sin when the Bible doesn't say it's a sin. For example, there's nothing in the Bible against gambling, but there are some verses condemning greed, which obviously means the Bible is against gambling because some people who gamble are greedy. No joke, that's literally the reason why you, as a Jehovah's Witness, can be disfellowshipped and shunned by everyone if they find out you hit a few casinos while you were in Vegas. There are also no Bible verses against masturbation, but Jehovah's Witnesses will tell you that the Bible principle is that Jesus said you shouldn't look at anyone wanting to have sex with them, and since that's what most people think of when they masturbate, the Bible is pretty much against masturbation and porn for the same reason. And there's nothing in the Bible against weed. In fact, there's reason to believe Israelites sacrificed cannabis as part of their burnt offerings during biblical times. But Jehovah's Witnesses made up a biblical principle to make smoking cannabis, tobacco, or doing any other kind of psychoactive drugs outside of the traditional alcohol and caffeine as unworthy of shunning. They get there mostly by using cherry-picked Bible verses as red herrings. If you look up whether smoking is a sin, you'll be shown 3 different red herrings. You'll get one verse saying you need to respect your life, and since smoking a cigarette is one of the main causes of preventable death, then you shouldn't do it. However, they completely ignore the second cause of preventable death in the US, obesity. Although the Bible does directly condemn eating in excess, which is the most common cause of obesity, the majority of the members of the governing body are obese. Why is it that the verse only applies to smoking, but not to something the Bible condemns? They would have the easiest time losing weight. I'm sure they can find a nutritionist that's willing to work with the cooks in Bethel to design the easiest to follow diet for them and get them a personal trainer so they could show how much they love their bodies by taking care of them. Isn't that what they're claiming to stand for? So many of us struggle with our weight because we lack the power, the resources, and the free time that these people have. But instead, they have never even addressed the need to stay active and healthy to take care of your body because, well, that would involve them putting some effort. They also quote love of neighbor because obviously secondhand smoke sounds like a dangerous thing, and they tell their followers that they need to be holy and preserve their bodies as a living sacrifice, and since they decided this is about smoking and not about keeping your body active and healthy, well, this Bible verse is against smoking. So you can't smoke tobacco, and you can get this fellowship for doing so, despite the Bible never mentioning anything about it. But they keep going. Further down, they talk about marijuana and other drugs, and they literally say that the Bible doesn't mention marijuana, but it contains principles to help you make the decision they decided was the right for you. And they quote 2 things: the need to control your mental faculties and obedience to secular laws. The last one I get, their code of ethics, comes from white men in the 60s, and they need something to fluff up the piece because the first one makes no sense. It simply states that you need to love Jehovah with your whole mind, and since you can't fully control your mind when using drugs, then your mind will focus on drugs instead of Jehovah. And that's it. That's why a teenager can get disfellowshipped and shunned by his own family if they catch him with a joint. Because you lose your mind, and it might be illegal. But when you're a Jehovah's Witness, you don't question it. At the end of the day, the rule is going to be the rule whether you like it or not. So the only thing you need to do is to conform, as Jade is shown doing.
You can guess what our next few studies were about.
And you should continue to be made new in your dominant mental attitude.
Knowing it was wrong was easy. Figuring out how to cope without it wasn't. Beating it felt impossible. Being free of it to serve Jehovah felt amazing.
You can tell just how clueless they are by portraying the beautiful and strong Jade as not being able to cope without weed, or by showing this as a weed stash. Seriously, what the hell is this supposed to be? There's a clean Ziploc bag and some sort of metal tube? Is that supposed to be the pipe? Does she also keep the grinder in there? Where's the tray? Why is she keeping it all in a fabric bag where the ashes are just gonna... And although nowadays you may be able to find some congregations where some elders may look the other way if you live in a legal state where everyone already consumes weed, and you have a literal medical note you can show them, and aren't smoking it or telling anyone you consume it, that's more the exception and not the rule. After all, Jehovah's Witnesses follow the instruction published in God's blog, jw.org, and you will never find a positive mention of cannabis there. And it's telling to see how terribly the views of God's channel have aged. You don't need to go that far back either. In the original Questions Young People Ask book, first published in 1989, it quotes some doctors saying that using marijuana would be like giving people molded bread to eat to get penicillin. And then says that any potential therapeutic benefits in no way modify the significance of the negative health effects of marijuana. In an Awake magazine from 1998, they quote some report I wasn't able to verify, where scientists from 3 different countries got together and concluded that marijuana had very similar effect on the brain as hard drugs like heroin. And in 2002, another Awake magazine said cannabis was known to seriously impair driving skills, provoke acute mental illness, including schizophrenia, does 5 more times more damage to the lungs than do cigarettes, may cause rare throat cancers, and may bring on fatal heart attacks in some young users. It also compares the amount of THC in a joint from the 60s with the potent joints you get when you get joints that are laced with hashish oil. Like higher contents of THC are somehow connected to the drug being dangerous. And I'm not gonna be here and tell you that nothing bad can ever come out of smoking weed, but we're still yet to directly link even one single death to cannabis consumption. Not even for driving under the influence, making it, at least statistically, insignificant in comparison to the deaths caused by alcohol consumption or obesity. I didn't know any of that when I was waking up. Jehovah's Witnesses have this terribly polarized view of psychoactive substances, where they basically separate them into 3 tiers: caffeine, which is okay to have, alcohol, which is okay to have but not too much, and drugs. To them, shrooms, marijuana, LSD, heroin, cocaine, and meth are all interchangeable drugs, and doing any of them is a sin of equal gravity. When Jehovah's Witnesses wake up, they start realizing that things are far more layered than Watchtower taught us. And since they want to sin without hurting anybody, a lot of them end up using cannabis. Waking up can be extremely anxiety-inducing, so it's no surprise to see ex-JWs just plain become stoners for a while. When I woke up and I started to decompartmentalize the indoctrination, remembering things that I had long suppressed and realizing that I wasn't gonna live forever and that I'm gonna die one day in, at most, a few decades along with everyone else I will ever love, has been pretty anxiety-inducing. I've had anxiety issues for years, and I have tried a wild variety of anxiety meds to try and fix that. But all of them had worse side effects than the anxiety, so I couldn't keep taking any of them. But when I was waking up less than 2 years ago, I found some dealers post on a Facebook group. Cannabis may not be regulated where I live, so I had never had the chance to purchase one marijuana before. I didn't tell my partner, I just arranged the transaction for one pre-roll of something called indoor granddaddy purple from a very nice and smiling guy at a mall's parking lot. I lit it up, but I had no idea how to smoke it, so I had a very hard time getting the smoke into my lungs and ended up wasting the whole joint. So I bought another one a few days later and tried again with some tutorials on how to smoke on YouTube. When I was finally able to inhale the smoke and the THC started to run through my veins, I started feeling good, better even. I started to think about the things I worried less. It was like someone was lowering the volume on all of the worries and problems I had, not to the point where I wasn't aware of them anymore, but just so they didn't occupy as much space in my mind. My mind, for the very first time, felt quiet and at peace. And I started tearing up because I was feeling, for the very first time, comfortable in my own mind. That's when I realized that my psychiatrist was right, and I did have a chronic anxiety problem, which I had previously thought was just my psychiatrist exaggerating, because I had spent so long dealing with so much anxiety about the future, about Armageddon, about death, about Jehovah's approval, that I didn't know how it felt to not be anxious. I have obviously kept using weed since, and I did end up learning how to smoke, but the benefits go beyond me getting stoned. Thanks to weed, I now realize there's a calmer, less anxious version of myself, and it has motivated me to find that peace in other places while being sober, like meditating or practicing mindfulness. It has helped me to put some distance between me and my problems and given me ways to think that I'm pretty sure I'll use even if I ever stop smoking. I've also had some experiences with other substances, but let me know if that's something you'd like to know more of below. Or join my Patreon to get special voting power on my next video. That way you can join people like Christian, who just upgraded his membership to my favorite tier, where Caleb looks so much like me in real life that this might as well be a face reveal. And just to honor him, I'm gonna end this video by lacing a marijuana cigarette with hashish oil, light it up, and make a personalized card for every single one of my patrons. Will I be doing this again for you next month if you join? Probably not. I don't have that much weed.